So while I was playing through A Plague Tale Innocence, I kept asking myself, why am I still playing this? To say that I was enjoying myself isn't quite right. Fun also wasn't the correct word, so why? All I could do was to continue pushing forward through this horrifying and detestable world with that one word lingering in my subconsciousness. Why? Hello and welcome, I'm Zabraxi, and we are going to be talking about a very, very important game today. A Plague Tale Innocence is something really special, and it's probably one of the most important titles that's come out in recent years. It deals with something powerful, like hopelessness, without entirely removing hope like you'd expect. Let's take a look.
Mommy says I shouldn't leave the house, you know.
I know.
That must be why I feel all funny.
I don't think it's too much of a surprise that I grew a desire to play this game when I did. A Plague Tale delves deep into the horrors of the worst pandemic human history has ever known. COVID-19 has been concerning for many, but it stands nothing to the devastation of the pestilence, the great mortality, the Black Death. Set in 1348, we follow Amicia and her younger brother Hugo as they navigate through the initial surge of the Black Plague, on top of the hordes of rats spreading the bubonic plague and consuming everything in sight. There lies a faction of the Inquisition wreaking havoc. Nobody would expect them at a time like this. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition and stuff? Look, honestly, this game isn't a joy to be in. It's gross and sad and all around miserable, so I tried to crack that little joke to hopefully lighten the mood and keep that sense of hope and humanity alive. This is something the game does itself, and it does pull off very gracefully. Many times, characters will attempt to crack a joke or make light of some event. The deliveries almost feel desperate, though, as if the words being spoken are to cling to the joyous days just weeks ago.
Serves him right.
It's noisy.
Try to be a bit more enthusiastic, will you?
But perhaps I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's start with the main characters, Amicia and Hugo. The game primarily revolves around these two as a duo, with Amicia taking the lead. Most of the time, A Plague Tale is a giant escort quest. Yeah, hold on, I know, that sounds really bad. However, thankfully, this game doesn't fall into any of the traps that you would typically expect. Hugo never once feels like a burden or a nuisance. There aren't too many times where he's critical to gameplay, thus he doesn't need to become too much of a hindrance to the player's experience. Instead, Hugo provides a different type of value: contrast. The primary purpose for Hugo to tag along in the adventure is a narrative one. The Inquisition wants Hugo for some unknown reason, and Amicia is forced to take care of him as they try to find safety. Along the way, you will have to do some pretty horrible things in order to survive and keep Hugo safe. This will, of course, include killing lots of people, actually, like, way more than you'd think. Many of these murders will be incredibly brutal and unsettling, especially when you bring the rats into account. Seemingly every area is being infested by these incredibly aggressive and carnivorous rats. The only way to keep safe from the rats is the light of fire. This rule applies to you, the player, but also the Crusaders of the Inquisition. In many situations, the best method you'll have to get past the rats won't be to just avoid them or to use fire, but to use people. Resources are relatively limited, especially anything fire-based, so if a soldier happens to be in the way of your path to safety, well, you can always knock out his torch. You see, many games will narratively address what you've done, but the moment-to-moment gameplay will continue to have murder upon murder without any sort of representation or acknowledgement of what you're really doing as the player. Typically, you just kind of kill the emotions of your character so you can continue to kill and rid yourself of that pesky humanity thing, that gross, nasty humanity thing. It's in these moments that the contrast of Hugo's presence will come into full effect. Since he's such a young child, his naivety is still intact. He may be terrified by something you do, or he may beg Amicia to answer why she would commit such an atrocity, or even thank her for keeping him safe because he can't. While Amicia, and the player by extension, are forced to heinously act upon the horrors of survival, Hugo provides a grounding that is so desperately needed in most games attempting to address these horrors of violence and vengeance. Even during moments when the dark side of the mind may think of a brutal way to kill someone in the game and find joy in that, the moment the act is done, we may be greeted with the squealing or the nauseousness of a young, small boy. Now we are immediately reminded of what we're really doing and how tragic it all really is, even in just a video game.
Amicia. You killed him.
Hopelessness is a really heavy theme that is handled masterfully. I don't think it's a coincidence that the literal rats aren't the only rat enemies. The fact the Crusaders are scavenging and ruthlessly murdering animalistically and pathetically also makes them rats. Threats of illness and plague, such as the one being carried around by these rodents, is horrifying and provides enough oppression alone. Despite that, the hungering thirst for blood is even stronger amongst the human enemies. These people are horrible, pathetic fanatics who disregard any life that isn't their own. If anything is to oppose their ideology, then murder of the innocent isn't just acceptable, but encouraged. Much of the time throughout, we will be experiencing this despair left by the rats and the rats. Along that journey, you will also bump into others who have been affected by all of this surrounding chaos. These characters will also compound those feelings of hopelessness felt by all involved. Yet, as a great story does, there's still these moments of hope that shine through. Despite so much of this game living in negativity, there still exists comforting junctures that help prevent too much fatigue. These breaths of fresh air are so rewarding, and they reinvigorate you to keep moving forward.
You know what that is?
Hawthorn, I think. Nobody likes it because of the thorns, but it's good for the heart.
Well, aren't you a fount of knowledge?
Mommy taught me.
You can teach me then.
And will you teach me how to use the sling?
It's a deal.
So I'm still not entirely sure I've nailed down the why to that earlier question I had. Maybe it's the gameplay, maybe it's the technical achievements. I first went into this game knowing very little, but I had watched and read a couple reviews, but tried to keep my knowledge to a super minimum. Something I noticed was how little people mentioned gameplay. It was always glanced over like a bullet point in a list of requirements that at least need to be touched. So here I am too, fulfilling that bullet point. Look, I'm not going to change the world of video game reviews just yet. I don't even have 400 subscribers. But maybe if you would actually hit that button over there, Mitchell, then maybe I'd be a little higher than that. Huh? As mentioned earlier, the gameplay primarily acts as an escort mission for Hugo. These two mostly act as a single unit, but occasionally you'll be required to separate and play both of them. You may need to leave Hugo behind for a moment so that you can get additional speed and sneak around better. The trade-off here is that you don't get to go too far from Hugo, because if you do, he'll get scared and cry out, giving him away and resulting in a game over. This is almost never a concern, as leaving Hugo behind is only ever really needed once in the game to my memory. Hugo also has his own benefits though. Since he's such a little guy, he can fit into places that Amicia cannot. Hence, puzzles will require him in order to be solved, which creates a great synergy between the two characters' strengths, Amicia for combat, and Hugo for navigation. The crux of the gameplay comes down to puzzles. At its core, this is a puzzle game, no question. Combat is continually developed throughout the game in order to keep things fresh though. You'll unlock new tools and recipes, allowing Amicia to handle enemies and obstacles in completely new ways. Truth be told, there's only about a handful of different enemy types, and you'll experience them all within the first half of the game or so. This is both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that the game can provide a different method of puzzle presentation than many other titles. Typically in a puzzle game, there would be a constant string of new variables thrown into the mix. However, here, the problem solving stems from the variables being shifted around in interesting ways. Think of when you learn a new math problem, and once the teacher decides to shift that equation around, it becomes a lot more interesting. Okay, yeah, only I found it more interesting, but you know what I mean. It becomes harder. But there definitely is a curse to this approach, and it's just that the enemy encounters can feel super trivial and, at times, completely uneventful. There's definitely a horror or a more suspense vibe to this game, and the enemies just not feeling threatening at times really undersells just how horrific these people and animals are. There's also some slight progression system as you can find resources to craft upgrades. These are incredibly standard, like reloading your sling faster, increasing inventory size, etc. You're not going to find anything too exciting about the upgrade system here. What is exciting though is in the way that all of these tools will work with one another. I decided to make this review spoiler-free, so I won't go too in-depth into what the abilities are, do, or the combinations that may work, etc. Just know that there are some really fun and satisfying things you can pull off. All in all, the gameplay is fine. It's on par. It's passable. It gets the job done, and no more, no real less either. So, for the last time, why? I realized the answer to this question right at the end of the game, right after the closing credits, and when my experience finally came to a close. The thought that sprinted into my mind as the screen went black was, wow, this felt real. Not real in that there was massive horde of carnivorous rats, that this was a real event that was historically represented with pinpoint accuracy. No, and not even the fact that this game was beautiful in a way that had never been done before, that the graphical fidelity was truly next generation. No, the story of these two children felt like something real. This is one of the most human stories video games has ever told. The writing and pacing forces you into the minds of the protagonists. Despite issues with the gameplay, the actual tension is so thick the entire game that I was stuck in a forward-leaning position for my playthrough. Watching Amicia fumble with taking care of her younger brother is brilliant. These two don't know each other that well, and Hugo will get upset. He'll throw tantrums. He'll say the most honest thing that ever comes to his mind. He's a real kid, doing real kid things and acting in real kid ways.
And if there were monsters, we'd see some big bubbles.
You got me.
Mummy used to say that monsters are just those things too.
Just those things to which we have never given a name. She told me that too.
I would quite like to see a monster, actually.
Amicia herself is so kind to Hugo, while also being able to snap and fight with him in the next scene. She's horrified by what she has to do to survive, and yet craves vengeance against those who have not even committed a wrong against her, but are just associated with those that did. These two are human and can only handle so much before eventually breaking. Yet, they don't blow up in some dramatic emotional fair that practically every other game portrays, but instead, they react like real people. Sarcastic and passive-aggressive remarks might get thrown around, or you'll run away, but every behavior of these siblings was human. Perfectly, imperfectly human. I love video games, a lot, but they have a long way to go before the storytelling of this medium is anywhere on par with theater, film, or books. However, A Plague Tale Innocence is a massive leap forward as an example that the industry needs to take a note of. It needs to. This is a must-play for anyone who values video games as high art, and for anyone who wants to be told why they should keep playing video games. Thank you so much for watching my video. Seriously, thank you. If you've made it this far, it really means a lot to me. You've just taken up like 15, 20 minutes of your life to watch me talk about a video game. That's awesome. If you did like the video, hit that thumbs up button, the one that's down that way. I hope I'm pointing the right way. Hit that one. That really helps me know which one you liked. And if you didn't like it, do the same thing but to the other one. That helps me know what you didn't like. And if you want to see more of this, please subscribe at my channel size. It really means a lot. It helps me figure out what you liked and really what to make more of and etc. All that fun jazz. It helps me out. Helps me out and hopefully helps you out if you have more fun. So thank you. Thank you. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.